Hello and welcome to this edition of Eye on Africa on France 24. I'm Fraser Jackson. Here are the stories making headlines across the continent this evening. West African political bloc ECOWAS slaps sanctions on the military junta ruling Guinea. Failure to provide a plan for a return to civilian rule has resulted in the junta's assets being frozen, with the threat of more severe sanctions also laid on the table. While the bloc also condemned another military junta, this time in Mali. Bamako has been in a standoff with neighbouring Ivory Coast over 46 soldiers that have been held in Mali since July. And we meet the Ivorian-born man running for office in Italy. Ahead of Sunday's parliamentary vote, our team meets the man dubbed the Italian Bernie Sanders. The West African trading bloc ECOWAS is applying pressure to the military junta ruling Guinea after the army failed to provide a roadmap for a return to civilian rule. The group announced an assets freeze and a travel ban. It's also given a month-long window for a transition timeframe to be laid out before more severe sanctions may be applied. Caroline Lamberley tells us more.
It's a new ultimatum from ECOWAS. It gave Guinea's junta 1 month to agree to a reasonable and acceptable timeframe for a return to civilian rule or face more severe sanctions. The group has also given details of the sanctions announced on Thursday. These include an assets freeze and a travel ban on some members of Guinea's junta, and the suspension of all financial assistance and transactions from its financial institutions. Last, ambassadors from ECOWAS member states stationed in Guinea will be recalled for consultations. The junta came to power in a coup in September 2021. Several months later, in April, it announced a 3-year transition period. Ahead of Thursday's meeting, the acting president of ECOWAS told France 24 that this was unacceptable.
We spoke about it and agreed that it can't be longer than 24 months. This is non-negotiable for ECOWAS.
This comment provoked fury from Guinea's military junta.
Crude lies and intimidation are backward steps that dishonor the person who spoke them, as well as ECOWAS' image.
Guinea was suspended from ECOWAS following the 2021 coup.
Well, those sanctions were announced after an ECOWAS meeting that took place alongside the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Another topic of discussion was the detention of over 40 Ivorian soldiers in Mali. The bloc condemned Bamako, which says the troops were actually mercenaries. Ivory Coast maintains that they were sent there as part of a peacekeeping mission. For more, here's France 24's correspondent in Abidjan, Sophie Lemotte.
President Ouattara landed on Friday around midday, returning from the ECOWAS Special Summit held this week in New York, alongside the UN General Assembly. On the top of the agenda at this meeting, the 46 Ivorian soldiers still detained in Mali. They've been detained for over 2 months now, and there's little end in sight. Mali is conditioning their return on the release of Malian political figures exiled in Ivory Coast. Leaders at this meeting decided not to impose sanctions on Mali, but are taking the situation very seriously and have expressed their full support to Ivory Coast in this crisis. They also echoed the strong words of Ivorian authorities and said that Mali was essentially taking these soldiers hostage. West African authorities decided to send 3 political leaders to Bamako next week. The president of Ghana, Togo and Benin will be travelling to Mali to continue negotiations. Ivorian authorities say they do hope a peaceful and diplomatic outcome can be found, but a source close to the president said that Ivory Coast could lose patience. That same source told us that Mali and Ivory Coast do share some close economic ties. For example, Mali does get a lot of its electricity from Ivory Coast, and that if the situation does not improve by the end of the month, some bilateral sanctions, economic sanctions, could be imposed on Mali.
Moving on, South African national energy provider Eskom has held a decades-long monopoly on electricity production in the country, but ageing and poorly maintained coal-fired plants, along with mismanagement and corruption, have taken their toll. The company falls about 10% short of demand, resulting in regular power cuts and prompting the country to ink deals with renewable energy companies to help boost supply. For more, let's cross live to Cape Town and speak to our correspondent Nadine Theron. Nadine, thank you for joining us. What exactly are these deals and what impact are they likely to have on the energy crisis?
Well, these deals sound very nice. There are deals to procure renewable energy from private power producers, mostly wind and solar projects. And it's the fifth round of bidding that these deals, power producers went through, and they've been selected. There are 25 producers who've been selected to supply power to the South African power mix, and actually 89 others have been signed before. And another bidding window will open soon, and they've actually increased the capacity that bidders can now provide. But all the three new producers will only produce 420 megawatts, and that is so little. If you think of how much South Africa needs at the moment, some economists have predicted that South Africa will need 15 gigawatts added to the national power grid in order to stop the current power cuts in 15 years' time. So, it's not really going to make a difference. And the reason we have these deals is because of the government's commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2015. It's just for environmental reasons, but it's really not going to make a difference to the power supply in South Africa. And the reason why we have such bad and such interrupted power supply is because of mismanagement of the state power producer, ESCOM. ESCOM is not generating as much as it can. It's not generating up to capacity, and that's because of poor maintenance of its infrastructure. And this has been going on for years. It's actually started in 2008 when we started experiencing power cuts. And many new projects have been launched, many new ideas have been come up with, but ESCOM remains behind, and all its project deadlines have been delayed. These new projects are supposed to come online next year, and they're only going to take about 2 years to build in the first place. So none of it's been done on time anyway, and it doesn't really make a difference to the current crisis.
Well, you mentioned the power cuts. We're doing this interview over the phone because you're going through a power cut yourself at the moment. Despite South Africa being the most industrialized nation on the continent, how customized are South Africans to these power cuts?
I think South Africans are culturally accustomed. Everyone has their candles and plans made around load shedding. But the fact of the matter is no economy can function like this. Last week we had up to 9 hours of power cuts in some areas per day. We've heard that South Africa's already lost 1 million jobs due to the power cuts, and hundreds of thousands of jobs will still be lost. And mobile networks are also down while there are power cuts. It's not just Wi-Fi. And we've also had a call from health facilities and doctors who've asked ESCOM to be exempted from power cuts. All of these businesses, like critical healthcare, like hospitals, and most big businesses and medium-scale businesses have the private power generators on board, and those usually use diesel. And oil and diesel is so expensive in South Africa at the moment. Few businesses can still afford that, and even hospitals are now saying they can't afford to run diesel-powered generators for 8 hours a day, and patients' lives are at stake. But we've also heard that load shedding will be with us at least until 2030, because load shedding is what we call these power cuts here. And it's truly disruptive for the economy and for many career people find it very difficult to fulfill their job obligation, especially South African businesses with international clients.
Okay, well, Nadine Thurin, thank you for joining us there live from Cape Town. Next, around 400 people took to the streets of Kinshasa on Friday, voicing their opposition to the country's reliance on fossil fuels and drilling in the Congo basin. Ahead of November's COP27 climate summit in Egypt, DR Congo is set to hold pre-summit talks in October. Well, those meetings will come just months after the country put 27 oil and gas blocks up for auction, ignoring calls from environmentalists. They worry that drilling in the country's peatlands could release 30 billion tons of carbon that they hold. But the government says the drilling will help diversify the economy, and methods will be used which will minimize the environmental impact. Ebola has claimed 3 more lives in Uganda, bringing the total to 4. The total number of infections now stands at 11. That's up 4 from the previous day. The individuals are believed to have contracted the Sudan strain of the Ebola virus. Even though there's no vaccine for it, it reportedly is less transmissible and deadly than the Zaire strain, which killed thousands of people in eastern DR Congo in recent years. Ugandan health officials remain confident that they have the infrastructure needed to mount an effective response. And finally, on Sunday, Italians will vote for their new parliament, and among them is an atypical candidate. Ivorian candidate Abubakar Soumahoro used to be a farmhand before becoming the man dubbed the Italian Bernie Sanders. Take a look.
With some flyers in his hands, he walks the streets of Modena in the north of Italy. This is where Abubakar Soumahoro is campaigning non-stop. He was born in the Ivory Coast and arrived in Italy when he was 19. Over the last few years, he has become a union leader, a spokesperson for exploited workers, a cause that has made him one of the standout figures of the Italian left wing.
He talks about real problems, job insecurity, exploitation. These are the worries that we, the younger generation, are constantly worrying about. And he gives a voice to exploited workers in the fields.
A subject he knows well, because he has also worked as a tomato picker in the fields of southern Italy. An experience that made him aware of the fate of thousands of migrant farm workers in the peninsula.
I've worked as a harvester in the same tough conditions, from dawn to dusk, working for 12 or 13 hours a day for an absolute pittance, living in inhuman conditions. I had to sleep in the street.
An experience that has helped him to understand the discontent of a number of Italians who feel excluded and discriminated against. This group of students have just presented him with a petition detailing a list of measures to support young people.
He's the first politician who has agreed to sign our petition. He's the first one to have taken the time to listen to us, to understand our suggestions. It's not about ideology, but about concrete issues.
He is supported by both the left wing and the Green Party. His priorities, the implementation of a minimum salary and combating exploitation in the workplace, a political programme that he hopes will counterbalance the extreme right wing in Italy.
Well, that's it for this edition. Stay tuned to France 24.